The world was too loud. Noah Bennett pressed his noise-canceling headphones tighter against his ears, but even through the cushioned barrier, the city invaded. Car horns bleated like wounded animals. Pedestrians shouted into their phones. Somewhere, a construction crew jackhammered concrete into dust, each impact reverberating through his chest like a physical blow. But colors were quiet. The 12-year-old walked half a step behind his mother, Maggie, his gaze fixed downward at the sidewalk's mosaic of gray and black. Gray was safe. Gray didn't demand anything. But then, at the intersection of 5th and Madison, Noah's world tilted. Red. Not just any red. Not the dull crimson of a stop sign or the watery pink of a fire hydrant. This was pure red, the kind of red that existed in Noah's mind when he closed his eyes and imagined perfection. It was parked at the corner, gleaming under the afternoon sun like a ruby carved from light itself. A Ferrari. A limited edition 488 Pista. Noah didn't know the make or model. Those details meant nothing to him. What mattered was the curve of its body, the way the paint seemed to ripple like liquid fire, the chrome exhaust tips that caught the sun and scattered it into rainbow fragments. The car wasn't just an object. It was a symphony frozen in metal and glass. Noah, honey, wait. Maggie's voice was distant, muffled by his headphones and the roaring fascination that had seized him. He drifted toward the car like a moth to flame, his sneakers whispering against the pavement. The world's cacophony faded. There was only the red, the perfect, impossible red. His fingers tingled with the need to touch it, to confirm it was real and not some fever dream conjured by his overstimulated mind. 3 feet away. 2 feet. 1. Noah's hand extended, palm open, fingers trembling with something between reverence and compulsion. The metal was warm beneath his fingertips, smooth as glass, but somehow alive, vibrating with a subtle energy. He traced the curve of the door panel, marveling at the flawless surface. For exactly 2.7 seconds, Noah Bennett experienced peace. Then the world exploded. Marcus Sterling had paid $17,000 for the ceramic coating. $17,000. Not for the car itself. The Ferrari had cost him considerably more, though he preferred not to dwell on the precise figure his accountant had winced at, but for the mirror finish protection that made water bead on its surface like mercury on glass. The salesman had called it liquid glass technology, 9 layers of silicon dioxide and titanium dioxide that would protect the paint from UV rays, bird droppings, and the envious fingers of the poors who couldn't afford to so much as breathe on such a machine. Marcus sat in the driver's seat, his Italian leather loafers resting on pedals he'd barely pressed during his crawl through downtown traffic. The air conditioning hummed at 68 degrees Fahrenheit. His phone was pressed to his ear, the Bluetooth connection in his custom sound system somehow inferior to the intimacy of holding the device. So I told Henderson, if he wants the promotion, he needs to show me he's hungry, Marcus said, examining his reflection in the rearview mirror. Perfect hair, perfect teeth, perfect life. You don't get to VP by being comfortable. You claw your way up, or you get buried by someone who will. On the other end of the line, his college roommate made agreeable noises. Marcus wasn't listening. He was admiring the way sunlight played across his dashboard, the way pedestrians' heads turned as they passed his car. Envy was the sincerest form of flattery. Then he saw it. Movement in his peripheral vision. A small figure approaching his car. A child, wearing a wrinkled t-shirt and cargo shorts, with oversized headphones clamped over shaggy brown hair. The kid's hand was reaching out, fingers extended toward his door panel. Marcus's blood pressure spiked. I'll call you back, he said, disconnecting before his friend could respond. He watched, paralyzed by disbelief, as the child's grimy fingers made contact with his $17,000 coating. The kid was touching his car. Actually touching it. Like it was some mall display, some petting zoo attraction, Marcus's hand was on the door handle before conscious thought engaged. The door swung open with a pneumatic hiss, and he exploded onto the sidewalk with the fury of a man whose sacred space had been violated. What the hell do you think you're doing? The words came out louder than he'd intended, propelled by a rage that felt righteous and pure. The child jerked backward, but not fast enough. Those fingers, probably covered in God knows what filth, had already left their mark on his pristine surface. Marcus looked at the door panel. He couldn't see any smudge, The coating was, admittedly, quite good, but that wasn't the point. The principle was what mattered. You didn't touch other people's property. You didn't put your peasant hands on a work of art. The child was staring at him now, eyes wide but somehow unfocused, like he was looking through Marcus rather than at him. That only fueled the fire. Do you have any idea, how much this paint job costs? Marcus advanced, jabbing his finger toward the car. This coating is worth more than everything your family owns. You can't just. A woman rushed forward, the mother, presumably, in discount jeans and a faded blouse. I'm so sorry, he didn't mean. Control your kid. Marcus snapped. He turned back to the boy, who was now making a high-pitched humming sound, hands flapping at his sides. The sight disgusted Marcus. What's wrong with him? Is he? The word retarded died on Marcus's lips, replaced by something darker, something that bubbled up from a well of entitlement so deep he'd forgotten it had a bottom. His hand moved before his brain could stop it. The slap was open-palmed, cutting through the air with a sound like a gunshot. Time fractured. Noah Bennett's world, already a fragile ecosystem of carefully managed stimuli, shattered like the glass he imagined his perfect red car was made of. The impact of Marcus's hand against his cheek was more than pain. It was a supernova of sensation that overloaded every circuit in his neurological system. Sound first. The crack of flesh on flesh, magnified 1,000 times by his headphones, which had shifted but not fallen. It echoed in his skull like thunder in a canyon, repeating. Then pain, hot and sharp and spreading across his face like spilled acid. His skin burned. His jaw ached. Something metallic flooded his mouth. He'd bitten his tongue. But worst was the touch itself. Unexpected touch was violence to Noah's nervous system. His mother knew to warn him before a hug. His teachers knew to approach from the front, slowly, asking permission. This man had hit him, had invaded his space with force and fury, and Noah's mind simply couldn't process it. He spun, the momentum of the blow carrying him off balance. His knees hit the sidewalk. More pain, more unwanted sensation, and then he was falling sideways, his shoulders striking the concrete. The rough surface scraped his arm, each individual grain of cement a point of agony. The scream built in his chest like a pressure cooker reaching critical mass. It emerged as a high, keening wail that didn't sound human, a sound he couldn't control and couldn't stop. His hands flew to his face, then away, then back again, flapping frantically as his body tried to self-regulate and failed. Noah! Noah! His mother's voice was distant, underwater, wrong. Maggie Bennett dropped to her knees beside her son, hands hovering over him but not touching. She knew better than to touch when he was like this. Tears streamed down her face as she watched her boy rock back and forth, that terrible sound pouring from his throat, his eyes squeezed shut against a world that had betrayed him. You hit him, she screamed at Marcus, her voice cracking with maternal fury. He's autistic. He's 12 years old. You hit my son. Marcus stood frozen, his hands still raised slightly, his face cycling through emotions, shock, defensiveness, and then settling on indignation. He touched my car. I have witnesses. He damaged. He's a child. A crowd was forming. Pedestrians stopped, drawn by the commotion. Phones emerged from pockets. Cameras pointed at the scene. A businessman in a gray suit shouted, "Someone call the police." A teenage girl was already filming, whispering urgently into her phone's microphone. Oh my God, this guy just hit a special needs kid. Marcus's brain finally caught up with his actions. This was bad. This was very bad. His eyes darted to the gathering crowd, to the phones, to the woman sobbing over her son. He needed to leave. Now. Look, he started, but his words were drowned out by Noah's continued wailing. I'm calling my lawyer. You can't just. He turned and rushed back to his Ferrari, yanking the door open and throwing himself into the driver's seat. His hands shook as he jammed the key into the ignition. Yes, it had an actual key, a beautiful piece of machined metal that cost $800 to replace, and the engine roared to life with a snarl that would have thrilled him any other time. He threw the car into gear, ready to accelerate away from this nightmare, to put distance between himself and the consequences of his actions. That's when he saw it. A wall of chrome and black metal filling his windshield. A motorcycle. Not just any motorcycle, a massive Harley-Davidson, all brutal angles and barely contained power. It had appeared in front of his car as if materialized from thin air, so close that Marcus could see scratches in its leather saddlebags, could read the words embroidered on the rider's vest. Iron Wolves MC. SGT. At arms. The rider sat astride the machine like a monument to everything Marcus wasn't. 6'6" of solid muscle, bald head gleaming in the afternoon sun, arms crossed over a chest that looked capable of stopping bullets. The man wasn't moving, wasn't speaking, just existing, an immovable object in Marcus's path. Marcus laid on his horn. The Ferrari's horn was imported, tuned to be assertive without being crass, but against the rumble of the Harley's engine, it sounded like a mosquito whining at an elephant. "Move!" Marcus screamed, though his windows were up and the man couldn't possibly hear him. "Get out of the way." The biker didn't even look at him. He reached down, almost casually, and killed his engine. Then, with deliberate slowness, he swung his leg over the bike and deployed the kickstand. The motorcycle settled with a metallic click that sounded, to Marcus's increasingly panicked mind, like a prison door locking. The man straightened to his full height and finally, looked at Marcus through the windshield. His eyes were the color of winter ice. Marcus's hand hovered over the gear shift. He could reverse, could back up and find another route. But behind him, traffic had filled in. Cars were already honking, drivers shouting about the blockage. He was boxed in. The biker began to walk toward the Ferrari, his boots striking the pavement with the inevitability of a judge's gavel. Marcus's throat went dry. His $17,000 paint job was suddenly the least of his concerns. Silas, Tank. Riker had been waiting at the red light for 37 seconds when he heard the scream. Not the scream itself at first. His helmet muffled most street noise, but the sudden, shocked silence that followed it. The way a crowded sidewalk's ambient chatter cut off like someone had thrown a switch. That kind of silence meant something bad. He turned his head, scanning the intersection. His Harley rumbled beneath him, a 500-pound beast that he'd maintained himself for the past 12 years, every bolt and wire a known quantity. The motorcycle was an extension of his body, responding to the slightest shift in his weight, the smallest pressure of his fingers. There, southeast corner. A woman kneeling on the ground. A child, small, dark-haired, writhing. Tank's vision tunneled. The child was rocking, hands flapping. That particular quality of movement that Tank knew intimately, had seen 1,000 times in his sister's house, in his nephew David. The boy was stimmying, overwhelmed, in the grip of a sensory meltdown. And standing over them, backing away toward a red Ferrari, was a man in a tailored shirt, his hand still raised, his mouth moving with words Tank couldn't hear, but could imagine. Something in Tank's chest, something he'd kept locked and controlled for 2 decades since leaving the Marines, strained against its chains. The light turned green. Tank didn't move. Behind him, a Honda's horn chirped impatiently. He ignored it. The man, late 30s, clean-shaven, the kind of face Tank associated with tech bros and middle management, was getting into the Ferrari, fleeing the scene. Tank's eyes flicked to the child, still screaming, to the mother trying to comfort him without touching, to the gathering crowd of useless bystanders with their phones out. 20 years. Tank had gone 20 years without putting his hands on someone in anger. He'd promised himself, after the incident in Kandahar, after the court-martial that should have ended worse than it did, that he'd never let that part of himself out again. But watching someone flee after hurting a child, that was different. Tank's right hand twisted the throttle. The Harley's engine bellowed, a primal sound that cut through the street noise like a chainsaw. His left hand pulled in the clutch. He didn't bother with the turn signal. The Honda behind him laid on its horn as Tank's rear tire broke traction, the motorcycle pivoting in a tight arc that carried him into the oncoming lane. A delivery van's brakes squealed. Someone shouted. Tank didn't care. The Ferrari was moving, pulling away from the curb. The driver's eyes were fixed forward, probably checking his rear view for police, for witnesses, for anyone who might have captured his license plate. He wasn't checking for a 500-pound missile on 2 wheels. Tank accelerated hard, the Harley surging forward with the kind of torque that would have unseated a less experienced rider. 40 miles per hour. 50. The Ferrari was fast, but it was trapped in traffic, hemmed in by cars whose drivers were too shocked or too slow to react. Tank wasn't trapped by anything. He split lanes, threading between a taxi and a sedan with inches to spare on either side. His mirrors nearly kissed their paint jobs. The taxi driver shouted something in what might have been Punjabi. Tank was already past, focused entirely on the flash of red 2 cars ahead. The Ferrari's brake lights flared as it approached the next intersection. The light was yellow, about to turn red. The driver was calculating. Tank could see it in the car's hesitation, trying to decide if he could make it through. Tank made the decision for him. He punched the throttle and shot past the Ferrari's passenger side, close enough that the mirror made a brief, screaming contact with his saddlebag. Then he was in front, directly in the Ferrari's path, and Tank did something that went against every riding instinct he'd developed over 30 years on motorcycles. He braked. Hard. The Harley's front suspension compressed, the anti-lock brakes chattering as they fought for traction. Tank's body slammed forward against the tank, his core muscles engaging to keep him from flying over the handlebars. The world strobed in sharp, disconnected images. Windshield, pavement, the Ferrari's grille filling his peripheral vision, growing larger. Tank stopped 6 inches from the intersection's white line. The Ferrari stopped 1 inch from Tank's rear tire. For a moment, everything was still. Tank could hear his own heartbeat, slow and steady despite the adrenaline. The combat-tested calm that his therapist said was actually a symptom, but which Tank preferred to think of as a feature. He could hear the Ferrari's engine, a high-pitched, angry whine. He could hear, faintly, the continued sound of the child's distress half a block behind. Tank killed his engine. The sudden silence was profound. He swung his leg over the bike in a smooth, practiced motion and deployed the kickstand with a flick of his boot. The Harley settled into position with the solidity of a monument, blocking the entire right lane and half of the center. Only then did Tank remove his helmet. The driver of the Ferrari was staring at him, mouth open, eyes wide. Tank could see him clearly through the windshield, could see the $17,000 haircut, the Rolex, the manicured fingernails gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled terror. Tank hung his helmet on the left handlebar grip, where it swayed slightly in the breeze. He rolled his shoulders, hearing the familiar crack of vertebrae settling, and crossed his arms over his chest. The iron wolf's patch on his vest, a snarling wolf's head over crossed pistons, caught the sunlight. Below it, the rocker that read SGT, at arms, left no doubt about his position in the club hierarchy. Tank didn't speak, didn't shout, didn't make threats. He just stood there, a wall of muscle and ink and controlled fury, and waited. Behind the Ferrari, traffic was piling up. Horns began to blare. Someone shouted about calling the cops. Tank didn't move. The Ferrari's window rolled down, and the driver's voice emerged, high and cracking. "What the hell do you think you're doing? You could have killed us both. I'm calling the police." Tank's eyes met the driver's. The man stopped talking. "You hit a kid," Tank said. His voice was low, almost conversational, the kind of quiet that made people lean in to hear. "Over a car." He touched. "It's not." The driver sputtered, his bravado crumbling. "You can't just block traffic. This is illegal. You're—" Tank reached into his vest pocket. The driver flinched, hands flying up in an instinctive defensive gesture. But Tank wasn't reaching for a weapon. He was reaching for his phone. He pulled it out, unlocked it with his thumbprint, and opened the Iron Wolves group chat. 63 members, most of them within a 10-mile radius at any given time. Some were at work, some were at home, some were already riding. Tank typed 4 words, code red. 5th Madison. Then he added a pin of his location and hit send. He put the phone back in his pocket and looked at the driver. "Road's closed, pal," Tank said. "You're not going anywhere." Marcus Sterling had always believed that money bought freedom. Freedom from inconvenience. Freedom from the rules that constrained ordinary people. Freedom from consequences. Sitting in his Ferrari, trapped between a psychotic biker and a growing wall of honking traffic, Marcus was discovering that his beliefs might have been somewhat optimistic. "You can't do this," he shouted through the window, his voice reaching registers he hadn't accessed since puberty. This is kidnapping. False imprisonment. I know my rights." The biker, Tank, according to his vest, though Marcus suspected that wasn't the name on his birth certificate, didn't respond. He just stood there, arms crossed, staring at the Ferrari's hood with the intensity of a man admiring a particularly interesting rock. Marcus's hands trembled on the steering wheel. Sweat was beginning to soak through his Thomas pink shirt, creating dark patches under his arms that would definitely show in photos. Photos. God, how many people were filming this? The crowd on the sidewalk had grown, phones held high, capturing his humiliation from multiple angles. He needed to take control of this situation. Marcus laid on the horn again, holding it down for a full 5 seconds. The Ferrari's premium sound system was designed to be heard. Around him, other drivers joined in, creating a cacophony of automotive fury that should have been impossible to ignore. Tank didn't even blink. "Move your bike," Marcus screamed. "I'll run it over." He gunned the engine, letting the Ferrari's V8 roar with $300,000 worth of Italian engineering. The sound was glorious, powerful, the auditory equivalent of a raised middle finger. Tank reached into his pocket. Marcus's foot hovered over the accelerator, heart hammering. Was the man reaching for a gun? A knife? Marcus had seen Sons of Anarchy. He knew what these people were capable of. He should call the police. Right now? This was assault. Harassment. Probably extortion, or... Tank pulled out a cloth from his pocket. A microfiber cloth, the kind you'd use to clean eyeglasses or phone screens. Then, with movements so casual they bordered on contemptuous, Tank walked to the side of his Harley and began polishing his chrome. Marcus's brain short-circuited. The man was cleaning his motorcycle, while blocking traffic. While Marcus sat there, boxed in and helpless, this thug was buffing out fingerprints from his handlebars like he had all the time in the world. "What are you?" "You can't." Marcus's coherent speech functions were failing. "I'm calling the police." He grabbed his phone, nearly dropping it in his haste, and pulled up the emergency dial screen. His finger jabbed at 911. 911. What's your emergency? I'm being attacked. Marcus gasped into the phone. I'm at 5th and Madison, and there's a gang member blocking me in. He's threatening me. I need police immediately. Sir, can you describe the threat? Is anyone armed? He's. Marcus looked at Tank, who had moved on to polishing his side mirror. He's blocking the road. With his motorcycle. And he won't move. He's huge and covered in tattoos, and he's from some gang called the Iron Wolves and... Is he physically threatening you, sir? Has he made verbal threats, or displayed a weapon? No. But he's intimidating me. This is harassment. Assault. The 911 operator's voice took on a slightly weary tone. Sir, blocking traffic is a civil matter. If no one is threatening violence, you'll need to wait for traffic police to... Wait. Marcus's voice climbed another octave. I can't wait. I have a meeting. I have... A new sound cut through his panic. Low at first, barely audible over the traffic and his own racing heartbeat. But growing. A rhythmic rumble that seemed to come from everywhere at once, vibrating through the Ferrari's chassis, through the pavement, through Marcus's bones. Motorcycles. Not one. Not two. A lot. Marcus's head swiveled, trying to locate the source. There, coming down 5th Street from the north. And there, emerging from Madison to the east. And there, and there, and there. They appeared like wolves answering a howl, converging from every direction. Harleys, mostly, but also Ducatis, Triumphs, Indians, even a few sport bikes that looked absurdly out of place in the pack. Big bikes, small bikes, cruisers and choppers and everything in between. Each one wore the same patch. Iron Wolves MC. Sir? Sir, are you still there? Marcus had forgotten he was holding the phone. There's more of them. There's dozens of them. They're surrounding me. Sir, remain calm. I'm dispatching a unit to your location. Do not exit your vehicle. Do not engage with. The first motorcycle pulled up alongside Tank's Harley, its rider, a woman with a long gray braid and a face like tanned leather, killing her engine and deploying her kickstand in one smooth motion. She nodded to Tank. He nodded back. Another bike pulled in. Then another. They formed a perimeter around the Ferrari, not threatening, not revving engines or shouting, just there, creating a wall of metal and leather that extended in every direction. The traffic behind Marcus was in chaos now, cars trying to reverse, to change lanes, to escape. But the bikes were everywhere, filtering between vehicles, blocking exits, creating a gridlock that extended for blocks in every direction. Marcus realized, with a clarity that cut through his panic like ice water, that this wasn't random. This was coordinated. Planned. These people had done this before. A biker dismounted near Marcus's window. A younger guy, maybe 30, with elaborate sleeve tattoos and a beard that reached his chest. He didn't approach the car. Instead, he pulled out a lawn chair from his saddlebag. A lawn chair, unfolded it, and sat down 3 feet from Marcus's door. Then he pulled out a sandwich and began to eat. "Hello." The 911 operator's voice was tinny, distant. "Sir, are you in immediate danger?" Marcus looked at Tank, who had finished polishing his bike and was now leaning against it, checking his phone. He looked at the woman with the braid, who had produced a thermos and was pouring herself coffee. He looked at the guy with the sandwich, who caught Marcus's eye and gave him a cheerful thumbs up. "No," Marcus whispered. "No, they're not. They're just what, sir?" "Waiting." The message hit 63 phones within 30 seconds. Code red. 5th Madison. For the Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club, those 3 words carried the weight of an unbreakable oath. Not a request. Not a suggestion. A mobilization. Danny Wrench Kovac was elbow-deep in a transmission rebuild when his phone buzzed. He didn't even wipe the grease off his hands before checking it. One glance at the screen, and he was moving, shouting to his apprentice to lock up the shop. His bike, a 76 shovelhead he'd rebuilt from frame up, roared to life on the second kick. Wrench was rolling before the engine had fully warmed, cutting through side streets with the precision of someone who'd ridden these roads for 40 years. Sarah Duchess Chun was in a budget meeting when her phone vibrated. She glanced at it under the table, saw the code, and stood up mid-presentation. "Emergency," she said to the confused executives around the conference table. "I have to go, Ms. Chun, we're in the middle of." But Duchess was already gone, heels clicking down the hallway, her motorcycle jacket slung over her shoulder. Her Ducati Monster was parked in the executive lot, against policy, but no one had dared tell her to move it. She was doing 80 down the interstate before her coworkers made it back from their confused coffee break. Miguel St. Reyes was at his daughter's school, waiting in the pickup line, when the message came through. He read it twice, then looked at his daughter's classroom window. She'd understand. She always understood. He texted his ex-wife, "Emergency. Can you grab Rosa? We'll explain later." His Harley Road King was parked 2 blocks away. The school had complained about the noise, and he was there in 90 seconds. His teacher's aide badge still clipped to his shirt. From every corner of the city, they came. The mechanic and the executive. The teacher and the nurse. The retired Marine and the software engineer. The grandmother and the college student. United not by demographics or background, but by the patch on their vests and the bond it represented. Iron Wolves didn't tolerate injustice, especially not against kids. Tank watched them arrive with the satisfaction of a general seeing his forces assemble. He didn't need to give orders. Everyone knew their role. The first arrivals formed the inner perimeter, their bikes creating a barrier around the Ferrari that was simultaneously casual and impenetrable. They didn't rev their engines, didn't shout or threaten, just positioned their motorcycles and waited, a show of force that was all the more intimidating for its restraint. Wrench pulled up on Tank's left, killing his engine and swinging off the shovelhead with practiced ease. He was short, barely 5'6", but built like a fire hydrant, with forearms that looked capable of crushing walnuts. "What we got?" he asked, pulling a bandana from his pocket to wipe the persistent grease from his hands. Tank gestured toward the Ferrari with his chin. Rich boy smacked an autistic kid. Tried to flee the scene. Wrench's jaw tightened. The kid okay, still on the sidewalk with his mom. Melting down pretty hard. Duchess arrived next, her Ducati's distinctive L-twin engine announcing her presence before she came into view. She parked perpendicular to Tank's Harley, creating an arrow formation that blocked even more of the intersection. When she removed her helmet, her shoulder-length black hair was somehow still perfect. "Someone want to explain why I just abandoned a pitch meeting that took 3 months to arrange?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew and approved. "Asshole hit a special needs kid," Wrench said. "Over a car." Duchess's expression went glacial. She had a nephew with Down syndrome. "Which car?" Tank pointed. Duchess walked over to the Ferrari, circling it slowly, examining it with the eye of someone who'd spent years in the luxury car market before finding better ways to spend her time. She crouched down, inspecting the wheels, the brake calipers, the exhaust system. "Custom wheels," she said, loud enough for Marcus to hear through his closed windows. "Aftermarket exhaust. That's a $30,000 carbon fiber hood." She stood up, brushing invisible dust from her leather pants. Definitely compensating for something. Inside the Ferrari, Marcus's face flushed crimson. Saint arrived on his Road King, parking it in the middle of the intersection's crosswalk. He left the engine running, a statement, not a threat, and walked over to Tank. "How's the kid?" he asked immediately. Saint had been a special education teacher for 15 years before retiring. He knew the signs, the protocols, the damage that could be done by ignorant cruelty. "Don't know yet," Tank said. "Haven't approached the mother. Didn't want to overwhelm the situation more." Saint nodded. "I'll go check. With your permission?" Tank gestured his approval. Saint walked toward the sidewalk where Maggie still knelt beside her son, moving slowly, deliberately, making himself visible from a distance. He stopped 10 feet away and crouched down, making himself smaller, less threatening. "Ma'am," he called gently. "My name is Miguel. I'm a teacher. Can I help?" Back at the Ferrari, the perimeter continued to grow. 30 bikes became 40. 40 became 50. They didn't just block the intersection, they created a zone of control that extended for 2 full blocks in every direction, a motorcycle cordon that stopped traffic but allowed pedestrians to pass freely. Someone brought out traffic cones from their saddlebags. Tank wasn't sure who, but he appreciated the forethought, and set them up to direct confused drivers to alternate routes. Another rider, a woman Tank knew only as Radar, had a first aid kit and was heading toward the sidewalk to offer assistance if needed. This wasn't a gang. This wasn't violence or intimidation. This was a community taking care of its own. Tank looked at the Ferrari, at Marcus Sterling cowering in his expensive metal box, and felt a grim satisfaction. The man wanted to run? Fine. But he was going to face what he'd done first. Tank's phone buzzed. A text from the club president. "Axe, on my way. Don't do anything stupid." Tank typed back. "Too late. Already blocked 5th Street. Axe's response was immediate. "That's not what I meant, and you know it." Tank smiled slightly. Axe knew him too well. Knew that the temptation to yank open that Ferrari's door and introduce Marcus to the pavement was a living thing in Tank's chest, something he had to actively fight with every breath. But Tank had promised himself 20 years without violence. He wasn't breaking that streak for a coward like Marcus Sterling. There were better ways to make someone pay. Maggie Bennett had never seen so many motorcycles in her life. They kept coming, an endless stream of chrome and leather, filling the street with their presence until it seemed impossible that there had ever been room for anything else. The noise should have been overwhelming. Noah was still in the grips of his meltdown, hands over his ears, rocking, but somehow the rumble of engines felt different from the city's usual chaos. Deeper, more purposeful. "Ma'am," the voice came again, patient, calm. "I'm a special ed teacher. I might be able to help." Maggie looked up at the man who'd introduced himself as Miguel. He was maybe 40, Latino, with kind eyes and a vest that proclaimed him part of this, whatever this was. A gang? But he'd said he was a teacher, and he was keeping his distance, showing Noah he wasn't a threat. Maggie's voice cracked. "He won't let me touch him. When he's like this, I can't." "I understand," Miguel said softly. "Has he ever used pressure therapy?" "Deep pressure?" Maggie nodded, tears streaming down her face. "We have a weighted blanket at home, but—" "Radar," Miguel called over his shoulder. A woman with short-cropped hair and gauge earrings appeared. "You still carry that emergency blanket?" "Always." Radar dug into her saddlebag and produced a compact silver thermal blanket. "Will this work?" Miguel nodded. "It's not weighted, but the pressure might help." He turned back to Maggie. "Ma'am, what's your name?" "Maggie. And this is Noah." "Maggie, I'm going to try something. If it doesn't work, I'll stop immediately." "Okay." Maggie nodded, desperate for anything that might help her son. Miguel moved closer, slowly, narrating his actions in a low, steady voice. "Noah, my name is Miguel. I'm going to come near you now, just to help. I won't touch you unless you want me to." Noah's rocking didn't stop, but his eyes, squeezed shut, flickered slightly, acknowledging the words if not the speaker. Miguel unfolded the thermal blanket and held it up where Noah could see it through his fingers. "This blanket is very light, but when we wrap it around you, it will feel like a hug. A gentle hug. Would that be okay?" No response, but Noah's rocking slowed fractionally. Taking that as permission, Miguel carefully draped the blanket over Noah's shoulders, then, with Maggie's help, wrapped it snugly around his torso. Not tight enough to restrain, but firm enough to provide that deep pressure input that many autistic individuals found soothing. Noah's screaming began to decrease. Not stop. Not yet, but modulate, turning from a constant wail into hitching sobs. There you go, Miguel murmured. You're okay. You're safe. Around them, the iron wolves had created a protective perimeter. Not threatening, but present. A woman Tank knew as Duchess had positioned herself between Noah and the gathering crowd of gawkers, blocking their camera phones with her body. Wrench was directing traffic, or rather, redirecting it, his stocky frame somehow more authoritative than any traffic cops. And in the center of it all, the Ferrari sat trapped, its driver's face visible through the windshield, pale and sweating. Tank walked over to Miguel, moving carefully to stay in Noah's line of sight. Kid okay. Getting there, Miguel said. But he's going to need more than a blanket. That hit traumatized him. He'll need therapy, probably months of it. Tank's jaw clenched. He looked back at the Ferrari, at Marcus Sterling, and felt that familiar heat rising in his chest. 20 years. He'd gone 20 years. Tank. Miguel's voice was quiet but firm. I know what you're thinking. Don't. He hit a kid. I know. And he'll pay for it. But not by your hands. Tank forced his breathing to slow, his fists to unclench. Miguel was right. That's why Tank had called the pack instead of handling it alone. Because he knew his limits, knew when he needed his brothers and sisters to keep him from crossing lines he couldn't uncross. A new sound cut through the rumble of motorcycles, sirens. The crowd parted as two patrol cars pulled up to the edge of the motorcycle cordon. Four officers emerged, hands resting on their belts in that universal cop posture that meant, I'm ready for trouble, but hoping to avoid it. The lead officer was a black woman in her 40s, with sergeant stripes and the weary expression of someone who'd seen everything twice. Her nameplate read, Washington. She surveyed the scene. 60 motorcycles, one trapped Ferrari, a traumatized child on the sidewalk, and enough leather-clad bikers to fill a small convention center. Well, she said, her voice carrying surprising authority over the noise, this is new. Tank stepped forward, hands visible and non-threatening. Sergeant. Tank Riker. Washington's eyes narrowed. I should have known. What's the Iron Wolves version of events here? Driver in the Ferrari assaulted a minor. Tank said, gesturing toward Noah. Slapped him across the face hard enough to knock him down. Kid's autistic. Hit triggered a sensory meltdown. Driver tried to flee the scene. I stopped him. By blocking an entire intersection? By exercising my right to experience mechanical difficulties in an inconvenient location. Washington's lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close. Your bike broke down, did it? Kickstand's been sticky lately. Takes me a while to get it up. Uh-huh. Washington walked over to where Maggie sat with Noah. Miguel stepped aside respectfully. Ma'am, I'm Sergeant Washington. Can you tell me what happened? Maggie did, her voice shaking, her words tumbling over each other. Noah had touched the car. The man had screamed. Had hit Noah. Had called him. Maggie's voice broke. Had called him horrible things. Did anyone record this? Washington asked the crowd. 15 hands went up, phones already being pulled from pockets. Washington nodded, unsurprised. I'll need copies of all that footage. Officer Patterson, start collecting statements. She turned to her partner, a younger man who looked distinctly uncomfortable surrounded by so many bikers. And get the paramedics here. I want that boy checked out. Then she walked toward the Ferrari. Marcus Sterling had his window cracked exactly 2 inches. Enough to hear, but not enough for anyone to reach through. When Washington approached, he erupted into speech. Officer. Thank God. These people are holding me hostage. I want them arrested immediately. All of them. This is a legal assembly, and, sir, I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle. What? No. I'm the victim here. That child damaged my property, and these thugs. Sir. Washington's voice dropped 20 degrees. I have multiple witnesses stating that you struck a minor. I have video evidence being compiled as we speak. If you don't step out of this vehicle right now, I will add resisting arrest to your charges. Charges. I'm not the one who. Washington rapped on the window with her knuckles. Out. Now. Marcus fumbled with his seatbelt, hands shaking. When he finally opened the door and stepped out, he looked diminished somehow, smaller than he had when sitting behind the Ferrari's wheel. Marcus Sterling, Washington said, pulling out her handcuffs. You're under arrest for assault of a minor and leaving the scene of a crime. You have the right to remain silent. The Miranda rights continued, but Marcus wasn't listening. He was staring at the crowd, at the phone still recording, at the bikers watching his humiliation with expressions ranging from satisfaction to contempt. This isn't, you can't, he sputtered. Do you know who I am? I'm a VP at Tech Core Industries. I have lawyers. I'll sue the city. I'll sue all of you. Tank, standing 20 feet away, caught Marcus's eye. He didn't smile, didn't gloat, just held the man's gaze until Marcus looked away, defeated. My car, Marcus whispered as Washington guided him toward the patrol car. You can't just leave my car. Your car will be impounded as evidence, Washington said. You'll get it back after the investigation. Assuming you can still afford the impound fees after your lawyers are done bleeding you dry. As Marcus was loaded into the patrol car, the Iron Wolves began to disperse. Not all at once. That would have been too organized, too gang-like. But gradually, in ones and twos, kickstands coming up, engines rumbling to life. Duchess approached Tank. That was incredibly stupid, she said. I know. Could have gone very wrong. I know. You're lucky Washington's reasonable. I know. Duchess smiled. Good work. She mounted her Ducati and rode off, disappearing into traffic like she'd never been there. Wrench clapped Tank on the shoulder. Drinks are on you tonight, yeah? For making us all accomplices to traffic obstruction. Fair, Tank said. One by one they left. But not all of them. Saint stayed with Maggie and Noah until the paramedics arrived. Radar stayed to give her statement to the police. And Tank stayed because he wasn't done yet. He had one more thing to do. Marcus Sterling had been in the back of a police car exactly once before, during a college prank gone wrong. 20 years ago, when he'd been drunk and stupid, and someone else's father had made the charges disappear. This time felt different. His hands were cuffed behind his back, the metal cutting into his wrists. The back seat of the patrol car smelled like industrial cleaner, trying and failing to mask the scent of human misery. The window didn't open. The door handles were missing. The plexiglass barrier between him and Sergeant Washington made it impossible to have a dignified conversation. Through the window, he could see his Ferrari, his beautiful, pristine Ferrari, being hooked up to a tow truck. A biker, the woman with the gray braid, was taking photos of it with her phone, circling it like a shark, documenting every angle. That's my property, Marcus shouted at the plexiglass. You can't just. Washington glanced at him in the rearview mirror. Actually, we can. It's evidence in an assault case. You'll get it back when we're done processing it. When? How long is that? Could be weeks. Could be months. Depends on how backed up the evidence locker is. Washington's tone suggested she wasn't particularly motivated to expedite the process. Marcus slumped back against the seat, his designer shirt soaked through with sweat. This couldn't be happening. This was a nightmare. Any moment now, he'd wake up in his penthouse, and this whole day would be nothing but a stress-induced fever dream. But the handcuffs were very real. The watching crowd was very real. And the phones, God, the phones, were all very, very real. Officer, Marcus tried again, forcing his voice into something approximating calm. I understand there's been a misunderstanding. But I'm willing to. To what? Bribe me? No. I mean to explain. To clarify what actually happened. Multiple witnesses saw you hit a child, Mr. Sterling. There's video. What exactly needs clarification? He touched my car. He could have damaged it. I reacted to protect my property. By assaulting a 12-year-old with autism. I didn't know he was autistic. How was I supposed to? Doesn't matter. Washington pulled the patrol car away from the curb, navigating around the remaining motorcycles. You don't get to hit kids, special needs or not. You should have called the police if you thought there was damage. Marcus's phone, still in his pocket, unreachable with his hands cuffed, began to buzz. Once, twice, constantly. His boss, probably. His lawyer, hopefully. Maybe his mother, who was going to have some thoughts about her son being arrested. I need to make a phone call, Marcus said. That's my right, isn't it? One phone call. You'll get your call when we're processed at the station. About 20 minutes. 20 minutes felt like an eternity. Through the window, Marcus watched the city roll past. Ordinary people living ordinary lives, completely unaware that his was imploding. A jogger ran by, ponytail swinging. A couple walked their dog. A food truck vendor called out his specials to passing pedestrians. And somewhere in that crowd, someone's phone pinged with a notification. Then another. And another. Because the videos were already uploading. Rich asshole slaps autistic kid, gets instant justice. Biker gang blocks traffic to stop child abuser. Ferrari owner's meltdown after hitting special needs boy. The titles varied, but the content was the same. Marcus Sterling, VP of TechCore Industries, caught on camera in the act of striking a child. Marcus Sterling, screaming about his expensive car while a terrified boy sobbed on the ground. Marcus Sterling, being handcuffed and stuffed into a police car while dozens of motorcycles rumbled their approval. The videos weren't viral yet. It had only been 30 minutes, but they were spreading. A few hundred views each, then a few thousand, then tens of thousands. Marcus didn't know this yet. He was too busy thinking about his lawyers, his bail, his upcoming meeting that he was definitely going to miss. He was calculating damage control, planning his statement, figuring out how to spin this into a misunderstanding blown out of proportion by thugs with an agenda. What Marcus didn't realize was that no amount of spin could fix what was coming. Officer Patterson had been on the force for 3 years. In that time, he'd collected witness statements for everything from shoplifting to homicide. But he'd never had 15 people voluntarily line up to hand him video evidence before. "Here," said a man in a business suit, holding out his phone. "Got the whole thing. You can see him hit the kid clear as day." "I have a different angle," said a teenage girl, her phone already queued to the relevant timestamp. "You can hear what he said about the kid too. Called him the R word. Mine shows him trying to leave," offered an elderly woman leaning on a walker. Before that big fellow on the motorcycle stopped him, Patterson pulled out his tablet and began the painstaking process of collecting and cataloging each video. Every angle, every perspective. By the time he was done, he had 17 separate recordings of the incident. The prosecution was going to have a field day. Near the ambulance, Noah was being examined by a paramedic while Maggie hovered anxiously. The thermal blanket had helped, but Noah still hadn't spoken, hadn't made eye contact with anyone except, curiously, Miguel. "His pupils are reactive," the paramedic said, shining a light in Noah's eyes. Noah flinched but didn't pull away. "No signs of concussion, but that's a nasty bruise forming on his cheek. We should take him in for a full examination." "No hospitals," Maggie said quickly. "He can't. The lights, the sounds, it'll trigger another meltdown." The paramedic nodded understanding. "Then you'll need to monitor him closely tonight. If he shows any signs of confusion, vomiting, or severe headache, bring him to the ER immediately." "I will. Thank you." Tank had been watching from a distance, giving them space. But now he approached, moving slowly enough that Noah could track his movement. When he was 10 feet away, he stopped and crouched down to Noah's level. "Hey kid," he said softly. "You doing okay?" Noah didn't respond, but his eyes, red-rimmed and exhausted, focused on Tank's vest, on the Iron Wolf's patch, on the chrome buttons and the leather fringe. "You like motorcycles?" Tank asked. A tiny nod. The first voluntary response Noah had given anyone in 40 minutes. Tank glanced at Maggie. "Is it okay if I show him mine?" Maggie hesitated, then nodded. "Noah, this man helped you. He's safe." Tank stood and walked to his Harley, Noah's eyes tracking him the entire way. The boy didn't follow, not yet, but he was watching with an intensity that Tank recognized. The same look David got when he saw something that fascinated him. Tank ran his hand along the Harley's gas tank, the metal warm from the sun. "This is a 1998 Heritage Softail," he said, loud enough for Noah to hear. "I rebuilt her myself. New engine, new transmission, custom paint job." He pointed to different parts as he spoke, giving Noah time to process. "These are the saddlebags. This is the exhaust. These chrome pipes, they're what make that deep sound you hear when the engine runs." Noah stood up. Maggie put a hand on his shoulder, ready to stop him if needed, but Noah walked forward on his own. 3 steps. 5. Until he was standing next to Tank, staring at the motorcycle with the same awe he'd shown the Ferrari. "Want to touch it?" Tank asked. Noah's hand reached out, trembling slightly, and touched the chrome handlebar. His fingers traced the curve of the grip, the texture of the rubber, the cold metal of the brake lever. Tank watched the boy's face transform. The terror and pain faded, replaced by wonder. "It's beautiful," Noah whispered. The first words he'd spoken since being hit. Maggie's hand flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face again, but happy tears this time. Tank felt something in his chest crack. "Yeah," he said, his voice rough. "It is." Miguel appeared at Tank's elbow. That was good of you. Kid needed something to reset his brain. Figured Chrome might do it. You did more than that. Miguel gestured to the remaining bikers, to the crowd still watching, to the phones still recording. You showed people that justice doesn't always come from courtrooms. Jury's still out on that, Tank said. Rich guys like Sterling usually walk. Not this time. Miguel pulled out his own phone and showed Tank the screen. This time, the whole world's watching. The video had already hit local news sites. Twitter was exploding. Reddit's front page featured 3 different posts about the incident. The comments ranged from supportive, those bikers are heroes, to concerned, is this vigilante justice? To darkly amused, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. But they all agreed on one thing. Marcus Sterling was finished. Tank handed the phone back. Good. The club president's going to have words with you about this, Miguel said. Axe doesn't like when we make waves. I know. I'll deal with it. Worth it though. Tank looked at Noah, still running his hands over the motorcycle, a small smile on his bruised face. Yeah, worth it. The holding cell at the downtown precinct was exactly as degrading as Marcus had imagined. Concrete walls, metal bench, a toilet in the corner with no privacy, and 3 other occupants, each one looking at Marcus's designer clothes and Rolex with varying degrees of interest. First time, asked a man with neck tattoos and the kind of muscle mass that suggested prison yard workouts. Marcus pressed himself into the corner. My lawyer's coming. I'll be out of here soon. That's what they all say. Marcus's phone call had been brief and frustrating. His lawyer, a partner at one of the city's most prestigious firms, had listened to Marcus's explanation with increasingly skeptical silence. Let me get this straight, the lawyer had said. You hit a child. With autism. In front of witnesses. And it was recorded on video. He touched my car. Marcus, I don't care if he spray-painted profanity on your hood. You don't hit kids. Ever. For any reason. So you'll get me out? Bail? I can. I'll try. But I'm going to be honest with you. This is bad. Really bad. And if those videos go viral. The lawyer had sighed. I'll call you back when I know more about arraignment. That had been 2 hours ago. 2 hours of sitting in this cell, watching the other inmates whisper and point. 2 hours of his mind racing through worst-case scenarios. 2 hours of his phone, now in evidence lockup, buzzing with notifications he couldn't see. Finally, a guard appeared at the bars. Sterling, you made bail. Marcus nearly collapsed with relief. Thank God. Who? Your company posted it. But I'm supposed to tell you that you're on administrative leave pending an investigation. The relief curdled into dread. Administrative leave. That was corporate speak for, we're going to fire you, but we need to check with legal first. Marcus was processed out, his belongings returned in a plastic bag. His wallet. His keys, useless since his car was impounded. His phone. He turned it on with shaking hands. 147 missed calls. 89 text messages. 453 email notifications. The text from his boss was terse. We need to talk. Tomorrow. 9 a.m. Don't be late. The email from HR was worse. Your access to company systems has been temporarily suspended. Please surrender your badge and laptop to security before leaving the building. But the worst was the text from his mother. Marcus, what have you done? Attached was a link to YouTube. The video had 2.3 million views. Marcus clicked it with numb fingers. There he was, in high definition, screaming at a small boy. The audio was crystal clear. Get your dirty hands off my car. This thing's worth more than your whole family. Then the slap. The sound was sickening even through his phone's tiny speaker. The comments section was a sewage pit of rage. This guy deserves to rot in prison. Someone find out where he works. He shouldn't have a job after this. Those bikers are heroes. I'd buy every one of them a beer. The kid has autism. He didn't understand. This is evil. Marcus's hands were shaking so hard, he nearly dropped the phone. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. But it was. And it was about to get worse. Noah Bennett had never sat on a motorcycle before. His mother had always forbidden it. Too loud, too dangerous, too unpredictable. But Maggie looked at her son's face, saw the wonder there, and made an exception. Just for a minute, she said to Tank. And don't start the engine. Yes, ma'am. Tank lifted Noah onto the Harley's seat, the boy's legs barely long enough to reach the foot pegs. There you go, kid. You're a natural. Noah gripped the handlebars with both hands, his eyes wide. This close, he could see every detail. The worn leather of the seat, the scratches in the chrome that told stories of long roads traveled, the small dent in the gas tank that Tank had never bothered to fix because it reminded him of a particularly memorable trip to Sturgis. Can I? Noah's voice was barely audible. Can I see the engine? Tank blinked, surprised. Most kids wanted to honk the horn or pretend to ride. But Noah wanted to see the mechanics. You like engines? A vigorous nod. Tank pulled out his phone and opened a diagram app, showing Noah a detailed schematic of a Harley engine. This is how it works. The pistons move up and down, turning the crankshaft, which turns the primary chain, which turns the transmission. He explained it simply, but not condescendingly. And Noah absorbed every word, asking questions that showed a genuine understanding of mechanical principles. Maggie watched from a few feet away, tears still flowing. Miguel stood beside her, smiling. Your son's brilliant, Miguel said. He is, Maggie agreed. But most people don't see it. They just see the autism, the meltdowns, the difficult behavior. Tank sees it. They watched as Tank pulled a clean rag from his saddlebag and showed Noah how to polish chrome, the two of them working in companionable silence. I don't know how to thank you, Maggie said. All of you. You didn't have to help us. Yeah, we did. Miguel's voice was firm. That's what the Iron Wolves do. We protect people who can't protect themselves. I thought, Maggie hesitated. I thought motorcycle clubs were, gangs. Miguel laughed. Some are. We're not. We're teachers and mechanics and nurses and accountants who like to ride motorcycles and help our community. Tank over there, former Marine, now works as a machinist. Duchess is a tech executive. Saint, that's me. I taught special ed for 15 years. You're good people. We try to be. Tank stood up, stretching his back with an audible crack. Noah, your mom says we need to get you home. But I want to give you something first. He reached into his vest and pulled out a patch. Not the Iron Wolf's patch, but a smaller one. A single wolf's head, silver on black. This is a friend patch, Tank said, crouching down to Noah's level. It means you're under our protection. Anyone messes with you, you call me. He handed Maggie a business card with his number. Anytime, day or night. Noah took the patch with reverent hands, turning it over, examining the stitching. Thank you, he whispered. Tank ruffled his hair, gently, giving Noah time to pull away if he wanted. But Noah didn't pull away. He leaned into the touch, just slightly. As Maggie and Noah walked away, Noah clutching his patch and turning back every few steps to wave at Tank, Miguel put a hand on his friend's shoulder. You know the club's going to hear about this, he said. The roadblock. The media attention. I know. Axe is going to chew you out. I know. Was it worth it? Tank watched Noah disappear around the corner, the boy already looking more like himself, the trauma beginning to fade under the healing power of chrome and kindness. Yeah, Tank said. It was worth it. 1 month later, Marcus Sterling sat in the parking lot of an unemployment office, staring at the building like it might spontaneously combust if he looked at it hard enough. TechCorps had fired him 3 days after the incident. His lawyer had managed to get the assault charge reduced to a misdemeanor with probation and community service. 140 hours working with special needs children, a piece of irony so sharp it cut, but the damage was done. The video had gone mega-viral. 47 million views across all platforms. His name was Googleable infamy. His LinkedIn was flooded with messages ranging from death threats to offers to teach him a lesson. 3 different companies had rescinded job offers after background checks revealed his identity. His Ferrari had been returned with $1,700 in impound fees and a small, but noticeable scratch on the passenger door. He'd sold it 2 weeks later, unable to look at it without seeing Noah's terrified face. The money was running out. The lawyers had been expensive. The probation fees were ongoing. And no one would hire a VP famous for hitting autistic kids. Marcus's phone buzzed. An email from his probation officer, reminding him about his community service orientation tomorrow. He'd be working at a center for children with developmental disabilities. He wanted to laugh at the cosmic justice of it all, but he was too tired. Meanwhile, Noah Bennett sat in Tank's garage, watching as the big man rebuilt a carburetor. It had become their Saturday ritual. Maggie would drop Noah off in the morning, and Tank would teach him about motorcycles, engines, and the mechanical poetry of machines that ran on controlled explosions. Hand me the 3/8 wrench, Tank said. Noah selected the correct tool from the organized array without hesitation and passed it over. He'd learned the names of every tool in Tank's collection within 3 visits. "You're a natural mechanic," Tank said, not for the first time. Noah smiled. The bruise on his face had faded weeks ago, but the smile was new. He smiled more now, talked more. The weekly sessions with his therapist, paid for by a fundraiser the Iron Wolves had organized, were helping. "Can we work on the Sportster next?" Noah asked, gesturing to a partially disassembled motorcycle in the corner. "That's a 2-person job," Tank said. "But yeah, we can start on it today." They worked in comfortable silence, the smell of oil and metal filling the garage, the soft rock from Tank's ancient radio providing background ambience. Maggie watched through the window, marveling at the transformation in her son. He was still autistic, would always be autistic, but he was thriving in a way she'd never thought possible. "Thank you," she said to Miguel, who'd stopped by to drop off some parts. "Don't thank me. Thank Tank. I thank him every week. He won't accept it." Miguel smiled. "That's Tank. Does what's right because it's right, not because he wants credit. He's a good man." "He is." Miguel watched Tank and Noah work together, the former Marine's massive hands guiding the boy's smaller ones with infinite patience. "And you know what the best part is?" "What?" Marcus Sterling thought he was better than everyone because he had money and a fancy car. But the truth is, Tank's got something Sterling never will. "What's that?" "Purpose." Miguel headed toward his bike. "See you next week, Maggie. Tell Noah I'll bring those blueprints he wanted." As Miguel rode off, Maggie thought about purpose. About the Iron Wolves, who'd rallied to defend her son. About Tank, who'd given up his Saturday mornings to teach a traumatized boy about engines. About a community that proved family wasn't always blood. Sometimes it was leather and chrome, and people who showed up when it mattered. Inside the garage, Noah tightened a bolt under Tank's supervision, his tongue poking out in concentration. "Perfect," Tank said. "You did that perfectly." Noah beamed. For the first time in a long time, Maggie Bennett felt like everything was going to be okay.